I went from betting like $5 to the point where I'm now watching a game and I have over $300,000 on the line or of losses of that specific game. And so how did I get to that point?
Welcome back to the One Day at a Time podcast. Today, I have a very special guest. His name is Chaz D from Find Your More. Hey, Chaz, how you doing?
What's going on, Rob? Thanks for having me.
For those that haven't met you yet, what's like a really high-level, brief summary of who you are and what you do?
Yeah, so I'm 34 years old now. I decided to go back to school and get my master's in psychology to work with individuals on performance coaching and those who might be struggling with gambling addiction. I had a severe sports gambling addiction for about 15 plus years in my lifetime. And it took about, 10 plus years to really seek out for help individually. And so now I focus a lot of my time and efforts, sharing my story online and also going around to different speaking opportunities and conferences to bring light to the situation of sports gambling and where we stand in general as a society with sports gambling as it continues to get legalized here across the country. Do a ton of little activist work here and there and, still maintain my recovery and kind of what that looks like for me. And just really bringing and trying to shed light for the younger generation on risks that are associated with sports gambling in particular.
I appreciate that. And we're going to be probably diving into your story from kind of front to back throughout this podcast. But one thing that jumps out right away is you said it took you 10 years before you were willing to, kind of seek out help. Was that like a natural progression towards that? Or were you kind of pushing it away for a while?
When you're going throughout those years of gambling addiction, when you really start to look back on your journey with the addiction, you don't really start to recognize the impact it had for many years, right? It was the long-term effects that finally accumulated over time that got me to the point of suicidal thoughts and just really wanting to kind of end it all. And at the young age of 28, 29, when I have those thoughts, I'm in a relationship. I'm trying to live this second life in secrecy. And so, it gets to the point, unfortunately, where you have those thoughts of taking your own life because you don't really see any other way out. And that's what we see with a lot of people who are struggling with gambling addiction so far. And so, over those 10 years, I finally got to that point where I just didn't want to live anymore. And, I was tired of the everyday phone calls, the sweats, the who's going to call me looking for money and who do I owe money to, whether it's a bank or a bookie or somebody else. And so, I finally seeked out professional help after going to a couple different GA meetings. And it really changed my perspective on not just addiction in general and gambling addiction, but, people struggling with mental health. And I never really knew what mental health was until that point.
Well, obviously, the story has a happy ending because we're right here talking to each other today. So we're really happy to have you. And, in thinking about it, there's probably a lot of people that can relate to the uncertainty that comes from sports betting and gambling and maybe feels like they've reached a point in their life where they don't know what else to do, which is exactly why I wanted to have you on here to talk today. And I appreciate the time once again. For someone that, is watching this, what was it like the first time that you gambled? Because maybe they can relate to that experience. Maybe they're not all the way down that path yet, but what did it look like that very first time?
Teenagers, teenagers just doing teenager things, whether it's, hey, I bet I can throw faster than you, or I bet I can run faster than you, whatever it is, you're kind of just hanging out in that social setting with your friends at a young age. And you're not really understanding the terminology that you're using, like, hey, I bet I can do this more than you, or whatever it is. And so, I experienced that type of talk at a very young age, and it just kind of continued on throughout high school and competitive sports with my friends. And so you never really understood or could grasp the concept of what you were building at such a young age, like 15, 16 years old, to then mature throughout living on your own throughout college and then making the decisions now for yourself. And you've been so accustomed to, wagering with friends and all this kind of stuff. You genuinely think it's harmless because nothing happened to you at a young age. As you get older and you start to really see the repercussions of it, like the long-term effect on your mental health, your credit score, financially, socially, like you're not really yourself. You can't hold a relationship. You can't hold a friendship. And so, all those things really coming together stemmed from the young age of 15, not knowing what I was doing to myself for my long-term situation.
Well, we know that the younger that you start gambling, the more likely it is you develop a gambling problem. So this is all basically adding up to this point.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember the moment that it kind of like stopped feeling fun?
Yeah, that's tough because sometimes it wasn't even about having fun. Sometimes it was just about getting that dopamine hit, you know? I don't really think sports betting was necessarily really fun unless you had a very, very close game and it did come down to the final touchdown pass with like 10 seconds left or something, right? You felt the excitement there because you felt like you were part of the winning side. However, there's many people that are on the losing side of that, which I had been multiple times. So, you know, to think about like when it really didn't start to become fun, I mean, it was very, very early on. It almost became like a job for me. Like, how can I make money doing this? Is it sustainable long term? I'm going to go through the roller coasters of the ups and downs and winning a lot of money and losing a lot of money, almost like a day trader or almost like a stock trader. And so I told myself that way I could continue doing it and keep justifying what I was doing because I was like, well, there's multiple people that, you know, do this for a living. And so they're going to have their ups and downs, but you know, you'll have your ups. Don't worry about it. And so I kept telling myself that. And then eventually it just turned into what ended up being that addiction for so long. So was it fun? I mean, sometimes, but sometimes you honestly just needed to have action on something because you felt like that's what you were doing it for.
Yeah, I kind of took the same approach of like gambling was providing a sense of meaning in my life. I mean, I did enjoy it to a certain extent as well. Like there was excitement, but at the end of the day, it was almost work, right? Like that's how it felt to me. When you, all right, so let's think back. When you were 14, what did you want to be when you grew up?
I wanted to play in the NHL. I was playing hockey competitively at a young age. And, you know, that's when the likes of Alex Ovechkin and Sidney Crosby were getting drafted in 04. And so hockey was in a really cool spot. You know, hockey was, I loved it top to bottom. I thought I could play in the NHL. And it took my focus away for sure. I felt like I was naturally good at hockey. So that's also why maybe I didn't try as hard to train and do it. And so I fell accustomed to just this. I'm naturally good at this. And to be honest, I felt like I was naturally good at gambling because I would win. And so I don't know if it was, you know, something like that changed it. But my dream was to play in the NHL or just be in business in general. Both my parents are entrepreneurs. And so I saw what lifestyle they could have being an entrepreneur and owning your own business. You have a little bit more flexibility. And you know, my brother and I had a great childhood because of that. And so I found myself being drawn and wanting to be an entrepreneur as well.
Was there a point that you can remember where you stopped wanting to be an NHL player or an entrepreneur and you wanted to be a gambler?
Yeah, probably like 21, 22 in college. I kind of felt like I was able to potentially do it for a living because I knew I wasn't going to play in the NHL by that time. You kind of lose sight of your dream at that age. And so I hung up the skates for good and still played here and there like men's league, but I felt like I could be a gambler potentially and make some good money doing it and use the winnings to invest in entrepreneurship and invest in other business ideas. And that was the mindset I had for many years, which kind of trapped me into that cycle that I was in. It was such a short period of time that I thought I could do that. But that's what ultimately, even being in that small window where I thought I could do this for a living, made the addiction really skyrocket.
This is really interesting to me because it's not a conversation that I've had with anyone else before. But when I was doing my gambling right around, 20, 21 years old, I told myself something similar. It was like, I want to be a business owner because I don't want to have to work like other people. Like if I can get a big win, then I'll start a business. And then it did happen that I started a business, I stuck with it for maybe like 2 weeks. Did you feel like that as well in the early days of like entrepreneurship, that the gambling felt like a more tempting path than working on the business?
Yeah, because you feel like you can win money on an everyday basis, right? As long as you're in the green every day, you would have a successful business, right? And so you become engulfed in that mindset and you see what other people are doing within the gambling space, how they are making money doing it, and they're having successful businesses on the side. So you think, hey, as long as I'm green every day, it could be $10, $100, $1,000. If I'm green, we're moving in the right direction. But how do you really handle those big losses, right? Where you lose everything in one day and you're like, oh my goodness, I have to rebuild everything now. So that's kind of a weird chase at the same time. Like, can I rebuild what I just lost? There was times where, I mean, we've talked numbers before where I've lost a significant amount of money in one day. And it took me a couple months to rebuild it all the way back up to that one day of loss. And then you just lose it again. And so it becomes a cat and mouse game where you're chasing something that you think is attainable, but in the long run, there's no sustainability to that lifestyle at all.
100% agreed. And it's like this idea that we see when we get the troll comments online, right? Like, don't give up. Like, you got to keep going. Well, gambling just happens to be like the one space where continuing to go will only make things worse. Like, I get it from the business side, right? Like, don't give up too soon or you're going to be a loser, right? You want to go and invest in your business and try to win. But when the business is rigged against you, there's no valor. There's no good part of that. So I just wanted to throw that in.
There's no long-term longevity. There's no longevity there. I mean, yeah, you have your successful days and you'll have your bad days, but the bad days will always outweigh the good days. It's just that's why the casinos stand taller than us.
Yeah. I mean, fair enough. I don't usually go and talk numbers on the account, but I think for the sake of like kind of expressing the severity of this story, like what was kind of your worst day? You can talk numbers, you can talk feelings, but like what was going on the day that you would call your bottom?
Yeah, I mean, I remember the play, down to the play, where that play specifically could have either altered my recovery journey or I could have still been gambling to this day. I'll never know the answer to that because it went one way. So I can't play the what if game, but I do remember it was Monday Night Football. I live out here in Arizona. The Arizona Cardinals were playing the LA Rams. And I thought it was an automatic. Cardinals were playing well throughout the season. This game was in December. And so it was a game that the Cardinals, I felt like, would win at home to continue whatever season they had going, right? They had a good season going. Anyway, so I'm taking a look at the lines that morning, and I'm like, well, this is Monday Night Football. It's in here in Arizona. This will be kind of a layup of a game. And so I put on the beginning of the game, I put about $95,000 on the Cardinals to win, just outright money line. And so that's all I had at the time. Then all of a sudden, as the game continues, the Rams they're up like 10 in the fourth quarter. There's a live line right now on the app that I was using. And so I was like, okay, I could take a live line right now. Rams are up, 10 right now. I'm going to take -7.5 on a live line. Put $220,000 roughly on the live line because I was trying to offset my original bet because I knew the Cardinals weren't going to win this game now, money line. However, I could maybe offset my loss and cover it on the back end. It's 4th and 14. Kyler Murray's got the ball at his own 14-yard line. And again, they're down 10, so they're trying to drive the field. 4th and 14, he scrambles back. There's like 2 minutes left in the game. Scrambles back, like dodging guys, and I'm just like sitting there in my living room, I'm like, come on, tackle him, because then I win the live line, more than likely at least. And so he drops back. He throws a Hail Mary to Christian Kirk, and he beats the defender. I think it was Jalen Ramsey at the time, beats the defender and catches it at the St. Louis Rams, like 45-yard line, 4th and 14 from his own 14. And I'm like, how does that happen? Like that's less than a 1% chance of that even happening. And I was like, oh no, they're going to kick a field goal. And they throw one more 11-yard out to DeAndre Hopkins. They get down to like the 33-yard line or something like that with like 1:14 left. And out comes the field goal team to kick a field goal. And they hit it. And they recover the onside kick, ironically enough. But by that time, I knew it doesn't matter if they recover the onside kick or not. They're going to lose by 7. And I had the Rams -7.5. So I ended up losing that game. So I lost both bets. And so, on that one NFL game alone, I lost over $300,000. And that was, it's wild to say that, right? That was, I don't know if that was the aha moment, which is even more crazy to think about. But that was definitely after I'd already been severely battling depression and anxiety. And that's when it really kicked into gear. And then that's when I really started to seek out help after that game.
Something that's always fascinated me about problem gamblers is our ability to recall events like to the T, the detail on that story. I mean, it's incredible just thinking that was probably how many years ago was that?
Over 3.
over 3 years ago, and you
I think it
named
was
all the
about
players.
3 years ago. So I've been in recovery for about 3 years. It depends, that's again, that game could go either way because, I knew I was going to lose that original bet. However, if the Rams cover that line, who knows where I would be today.
Sure.
That's a significant amount of money to lose. That's multiple years of salary for the average American. And, at the time I had that because I was working for a company where I had equity in the company. And so, but yeah, I mean, I've struggled since that day financially, but rebuilding, and as a gambler too, like I was so accustomed to that. Like I went from betting like $5 to the point where I'm now watching a game and I have over $300,000 on the line or of losses of that specific game. And so how did I get to that point? That's the 10 to 15 year journey of gambling that you will get to that point eventually. I started as a 15-year-old kid where I didn't even have a job yet legally, to where now I have equity in a company and I'm risking that on a game. So you will get to that point later in your life because as your life evolves, you make more money in your career. Opportunities present themselves to where you become flush with cash, whether you sell a home or sell assets or whatever it is. There will come a point in time where you have a significant amount of cash available. And that will be the deciding moment on truly if you have a problem gambling or not.
Yeah, I appreciate you diving a little bit further into that, because a lot of people that are watching probably thought when you were telling the story, oh, I've never bet $300,000 on a game, so that means that I don't have as bad of a problem as Chaz does. But the reality is you were gambling whatever you had access to at the time. You were putting everything that you could into the bet. And that's what's the important thing to take away. It's that you may have had the ability to gamble more than the average American, but if that person is risking everything that they have to their name, they're experiencing the exact same situation playing out as you did. And I just appreciate the extra context on that. Looking forward from that, this is the point now that you're considering getting help. What actually works to get you over that hump to now get to 3 years in recovery?
Yeah, that's hard because it's so different for everybody, right? Sometimes people can go to a inpatient clinic or an outpatient clinic, or they can do it on their own. I'm stubborn. I try to do everything on my own and prove to myself that I can do it on my own, which a lot of it I have, but I also had to seek out therapy to really dive into it and see if it was working or not. And therapy helped me get a lot of stuff out off my chest for sure. However, the recovery journey is something that I have to do for myself. I have to do exactly what works for me. And so, I've relapsed multiple times in those 3 years. And I think that's very important and transparent to say, because gambling is so easily accessible now. I have been able, it wasn't until last year when I started to self-exclude myself from the apps and everywhere else, right? So you have the ability to go back into it very easily if you don't take those proper steps. And so the self-exclusion thing has helped, but that was 2 years after I decided to get help, right? So there's been multiple relapses in that time, but every single time that I've relapsed, I've taken the emotions that I've learned from therapy and learned from my recovery journey as to what caused that, the trigger that caused that, what situation was I putting myself into at that time it forced me to go back and gamble. And I think that's important for anybody in recovery, whether it's drugs or alcohol or gambling. There's going to be something that triggers you back to where you want to go to, where you were during that addiction. And so for me, it's been a lot of trial and error. It's been a lot of physical challenges. I'm very competitive. I'm 34 years old. I still want to push my body to limits and do things I've never done. So, I signed up for an Ironman, right? I've seen this joke online where it's like, you're 30 years old, you're either training for a marathon or you're having kids. And that's kind of like exactly where I stood. A lot of my friends are having kids right now, and I am training for an Ironman. The path of physical challenges really helped me get healthier, help my mind get a lot healthier too, which is important to accredit exercise to, is getting outside and really exercising. And then also just reconnecting with friends or family that I wronged during my addiction. I think it's important to go back to your roots as to who's there for you when you are really going through it. And I've got some friends and some family that saw what I went through, and they are still here today because they've chosen to accept what I've done in my life, but they've also now acknowledged that I'm wanting to live a better life. And that's made our relationships a lot more sustainable long term. But it's been very difficult to rebuild those relationships. So I concentrate on certain things throughout my recovery at a time. I try not to do it all at once, which we can sometimes fall into that trap of like, I want to be better now. I want to be better now. But it's not like that at all. Like, it's the rest of your life and a lifestyle that you're choosing, which Find Your More was that for me. I think it's going to continue to be a trial and error for many years to see what does and what works for me, especially as the advertising and everything is in my face every single day. I'm navigating a whole new world of technology with sports betting to where I can lose everything again in a matter of minutes. And that scares me a lot of times when it comes to, can I trust myself in relationships? Can I trust myself with myself? And so I'm working on that right now.
I appreciate the transparency there. And I think that one thing that's really important to take away, no matter where you're at in the journey, is this idea of trial and error. I had someone ask me on a live stream just earlier today, I've relapsed a bunch of times. Does that mean I'm a failure? And what I like to kind of say is that you're not a failure if you're able to use learning lessons and insights from what happened to avoid having the same thing happen again. Because a staple of my addiction was just repeating the same mistakes. And so I appreciate you saying this trial and error, because people might have this idea that if we're making content about gambling addiction, that we have it all figured out, that we know exactly what needs to be done for everyone. But the truth is, it's a lot of trial and error. And I mean, for years, it can literally take years.
Yeah. And everybody is different. And my recovery is going to look very different from yours. Even though we were both in gambling, we both also experienced different forms of gambling. And so gambling has so many different forms that's what makes it very difficult at the same time with what recovery does work. And so when I go to a lot of these conferences and I try to speak, I try to be very transparent with recovery looks different. Sometimes therapy will not work. This person needs to almost just come back to like basic habits. Like they're forgetting to make their bed in the morning. They're forgetting to go on a walk, right? Let's start with the basics and then let's see how that can progress over time. And that's kind of what I've done for myself.
Yeah, it's putting out the fire before you start to rebuild the foundation of the burning house. If you are someone that is just immersing yourself in terrible habits, you're going to be much more prone to giving in to moments of temptation. But if you're building yourself up and you are making sure that you're not going out and gambling every time you get stressed or bored, then you can start to work on, what's underlying this, what's been going on. And that's what you would do with a therapist. And in your case, you started creating content with your former therapist. How's that been?
It's been good. It's been good to collaborate with her. She has some fun projects coming up where she's actually going to be a therapist on a television show too, which is really cool. So she's got some fun things going on. We started a podcast to just try to offer a lot of additional resources. We haven't done an episode recently just because I've been going through some family stuff, but it's good. It's good to have her as not just a resource anymore, but, potential collaboration opportunities, because it's important to have therapists that are on board with your type of recovery too, because she learns from me just as much as I'm learning from her. And I think that's the field of mental health or psychology. What I'm noticing the most is we have to collaborate with many different walks of psychology. And we have to learn from each other more than just learning from, theories and textbooks and so forth. Like learning from each other, I think, has a ton of value, where it's starting to happen more kind of within this space, because her and I disagree on a lot of stuff. But coming from a gambler with 15 years of lived experience, it might work for somebody who is struggling. And she has now adapted to some things that I say, because I do have that lived experience, and it might work for one of her clients and it may not, but she's open now to trying it. And I think that's where it's very important on working with other people.
I couldn't agree more. That was one of my biggest misconceptions with my own therapy, that had I been able to go back in time and try it again with him, I think, I was expecting him to be an authoritarian figure and tell me, this is wrong, fix this, and then you're going to stop. But he wanted to present as more of a collaboration, which at the time I was like, why would I get a therapist to work with them? I want them to fix me. But I think there's a lot of value in the journey itself. As corny as it sounds, it's like that Sisyphus pushing the rock up the side of the mountain. You have to find some enjoyment in the process, or you're just waiting on goals to feel good. It's just like most of the time you're not going to feel good. Anyways, that aside, you know,
so true.
For someone that's watching this that might benefit from therapy, but says, I don't want to appear weak, what would you say to that person?
Yeah, that's a stigma that you definitely need to you got to get around it. I think at the end of the day, how that looks for you, I'm not quite sure. How you can really get around the concept of like therapy is bad or therapy makes you look weak. You know, we all know somebody who struggles, and whether they struggle with alcohol, drugs, addiction, gambling, like mental health in general, we know somebody that is struggling, and it could be from really past trauma, right? Maybe they experienced something firsthand that most people don't experience. And so you're not weak. Like we're all going to go through something. There's different severities and levels to what we go through as humans. And some of us are less fortunate than others. But at the same time, like there is no weakness in talking to somebody. There really isn't. Like that's why we are here. We're here to learn from each other. You and I have never met in person. We've only met digitally, right? And virtually. And so, but we've collaborated on a ton of stuff, and I've learned from you. And so it's like, that's why we are here, to learn from other people, to communicate with other people. And so if you look at it as a form of weakness, that's just somebody telling you that it's weak. That's somebody who probably should seek out help themselves is telling you that it's weak. Because their strength isn't going to come from themselves. They're getting their strength from like other people thinking that they're strong, but they could be very well weak. I think the best thing is a lot of these pro athletes are starting to come out and talk about it a little bit more, which is very important because they are not just role models, but they are what you would think is like the men of like sport, right? Like they're playing NFL. And so this guy doesn't have any health problems. This guy has no mental health problems. Whereas it's a great clip, and it's gone viral again when A.J. Brown played for the Tennessee Titans, and before he went to the Philadelphia Eagles, and he was suicidal at one point, and a news reporter got choked up asking him about that, and he had such a good answer, an empathetic answer, but also talked to his own experience.
It was a dark moment, and it was a year ago where I had thought about, taking my life. And it was special to me because it just came with my heart that I wanted to share with others and help others as much as I can. Like I said, I'm here. I'm so much to be grateful for. I'm blessed. I know I wake up every day and get to play the game that I love, but I have loved ones around me that love me dearly. And I just wanted to help someone. Hopefully, I could save a life or anything. So life happens to everyone. I'm human, just like everyone else. Just because I play this beautiful game, just doesn't mean life is not going to happen to me too. So I'm grateful for the person that was there for me. And I just wanted to encourage everyone to seek help if you're down and you're depressed, and just try to get help.
And that is one of the best wide receivers in the NFL who has millions of dollars in his bank account. And most people will never experience the lifestyle that he has. However, him and I are very similar because we have a brain between our ears, and we both struggle with mental health. So you might think that you don't have a ton of similarities with these people, but you do at the end of the day. And that's where I think the weakness of somebody saying that is just looking at a specific source or following a specific person that tells them that they are weak. And it's slowly going away, I think. I think the breaking of the stigma is working, but we want to make sure that those that are also breaking the stigma or talking about it don't get downplayed and looked at as weak in that process.
So yeah, right along those lines, right? You said AJ Brown has millions of dollars in his bank account, so it doesn't feel like we can relate to what he's going through, but yet at the end of the day, we're all human and we're all dealing with problems. When it came to my gambling, at least, I used to think like if I had a big win, it would solve everything because I viewed money as the solution. Since you've stopped gambling, how's your perception of money changed?
Yeah, I've had to rebuild a relationship with money. That's, I think, one of the hardest relationships you can rebuild. Sometimes as humans or like a friend or a family member, they're kind of like, the past is the past. let's move forward from this day forward. And that's something that my dad is also very good at too, right? He forgives very quickly, but he's very open to anything else. But the relationship with money is way different, because you lost the concept and the value of a dollar, and you did not understand, and you make a ton of relatable content with it. I'll go risk $500 on an NFL game, but $500 will buy groceries for an entire month. So you really start to not understand the value of a dollar there. And that's a relationship that's very difficult to rebuild, because I've had a lot of it and I've had none of it. And then on top of that, what you're trying to do is build wealth so you don't run into those problems anymore. So this is a long-term relationship that you have to rebuild with money, and you have to see just how valuable that money is to whatever your lifestyle is. I live a very simple and healthier lifestyle now, to where I've had to not care anymore about materialistic items. If I have clothes on my back and I look presentable, what else do I need? I don't need anything else. And so maybe a haircut here and there, but like, I don't need the fancy Lamborghinis anymore. Would I love one? Sure. If somebody wants to drop a Lambo in my lap, I'm probably going to drive it and take it. However, that's not what's important to me anymore. And I've had to really also rethink my mindset on materialistic items versus how do I want to enjoy life? I want memories. And one thing that I've always said now is memories over bets. I don't want to bet that I can be better than that person. I don't want to bet on a game. I want a memory of maybe it is going to a game with a friend. I've taken a friend of mine to a playoff basketball game, and we had a great memory doing that. That's what I'm going to value more now versus betting on the game. And so you have to rethink how your relationship with money is, what's important to you, and the lifestyle that you truly want to live versus the lifestyle that you see online.
When you went to that playoff game, were people around you in the stands gambling?
Oh, everywhere. I mean, it's everywhere, right? It's not even just the stands. It's the waiter at the restaurant who's got money on the game, or the bartender where you're grabbing a drink from is like, oh, we need the over here. And he's got like 3 guys on the bar ordering drinks from him, and they all took the over. So they're all watching it together. It's everywhere. And it's more apparent than ever because people don't care to talk about their bets. They are almost, it's becoming a part of a lifestyle that is, hey, do you want to go for a walk and grab a coffee? Hey, you want to throw $5 on a parlay together? Like, it's almost becoming so normalized that it's scary how fast that it's becoming normalized and how quickly it's changing relationships and friendships with people too. It's becoming very predatory at a young age too. So, I know college campuses used to have sponsorship deals with gambling websites. I don't know if they can anymore legally. However, it's not, Uber Eats, like these advertisings are everywhere. Wherever kids are ordering food, Amazon, DoorDash, it doesn't matter. There is now gambling advertising everywhere they go. And so it's going to happen at a very young age. It's going to become normalized at a very young age. And unfortunately, we will see the repercussions of that in different forms, whether it's credit card debt is at an all-time high, or nobody can buy homes right now, so everybody is renting apartments. We see apartments going up everywhere. Well, that's because people can't afford homes. Does it have to do with gambling? You can't really say no anymore. That's the scary thing I think that's going to start happening is as gambling becomes legalized, it's going to start affecting a lot of other stuff to where we don't think that gambling is a part of that. But credit card debt and student loan debt, just quickly too, it's wild. I want to find it, but I think it's something that like when a student takes their student loan and they pay it off and then they get the rest, for groceries or whatever, 20% of those people use some of those funds towards gambling. Yeah. And that is a scary statistic because that's front money that they have to pay back eventually. And then same thing with credit card companies. You used to be able to bet with credit cards.
I see all this playing out as well. I actually just saw a study from the UK that said that mortgage companies are now rejecting on a case-by-case basis people who submit applications that have a history of gambling on their credit reports. So they'll see the occasional bet and they'll say, wow, they're not good for a mortgage because they're going to lose all their money. So it's definitely impacting social aspects of life.
That's something that I've experienced firsthand. I cannot buy a house. I'm still rebuilding my credit score. there is no way I'll be able to buy a home within the next probably 5 years, unless I somehow win the lottery and I can buy it with cash. But I'm not going to buy a lottery ticket. So, you know, it's like, yeah, right. Like it's one of those things where it's affected my life so much personally and financially that I will not be able to buy a house within the next 5 years. So how does that lifestyle look for me? I have to live within my means. I have to rebuild a savings account if I ever want to buy a house, and I need to fix my credit score first. And so, you know, it's a long-term effect on, and fortunately I don't have kids, but it didn't affect any children I have, but it did affect my family. I can't go to my nephew's birthday parties all the time, right? Or something like that, to where it's going to affect everything that you do financially, even if it's not like you in particular. It could affect somebody else.
To bring a more positive light towards the end of this podcast, I know that you're doing a challenge where you're running for 34 minutes every day. Why are you doing it? What are you hoping to accomplish? And, you know, what's the message there?
Yeah, you know, it goes back to just doing personal challenges to help with my mental health. It's more, if my mental health is in a good state, I know that I'm understanding of my addiction a lot more. And so I'm not necessarily running to try to fight my gambling addiction. I'm running to fight my mental health. But at the same time, it's bringing awareness to where my mental health was stemming from, which was gambling addiction. And so I'm running 34 minutes because I'm 34 years old. And so it seemed like a very easy number at the time to just correlate. I'm 34 years old, I'll run 34 minutes. But what I think it's also doing is showing, like, I'm 34 years old. And if I can go on a run every single day, somebody who's struggling, who's 25, could go on a run every single day. And we're seeing the younger age demographic being affected. And so if I'm showing that I'm 34 years old and I'm having to start my life over essentially from nothing, then you can too. And so I think that's very important to have the correlation of 34. And it's just to get outside, right? It's to bring awareness to gambling addiction, yes. And I'll do that through a lot of my videos. However, it's also just to show people that if you just get outside for 34 minutes a day, you'd be surprised as to what you can learn from a podcast, or the fresh air that you can breathe for 34 minutes of just being outside, and what it does to your overall mental state. That's what we forget to do, is we forget to go back to the basics. And this is the most basic personal challenge. But I will say it's been very difficult, because there's times where I'm laying in bed and I'm like, I don't want to go on a run right now. So it's also building some discipline within me. It's also building a lot of other characteristics. And I think that's the power of something as simple as running, is you really start to see how your body reacts to it.
And what would you say to someone who's kind of at that low point that you were at, where they're having thoughts of, maybe I don't want to be here anymore? What's one piece of advice you would leave with them?
Yeah, I think the easiest answer for somebody who's struggling, especially with suicidal thoughts, is it's not worth it. I think we all know that subconsciously too, but unfortunately it doesn't help people when we see suicide rates continuing, skyrocketing like crazy, especially with men. 3 out of 4 suicides are men. That's a 75% rate. That is a staggering number. And 1 in 5 of those are due to financial ramifications, and that could be stemming from gambling. So I think if you are struggling, you definitely have to seek out some sort of help. And that help could be honestly just picking up the phone and calling a friend. I have gentlemen who are young, fresh out of college, who reach out to me on Instagram and they're like, hey, I just need to talk to you for 30 minutes. And I talk to them for 30 minutes. They hear my story and it's helped them. So find the community of people that are going through the same thing that you're going through. Don't try to go to the community of people that are, flaunting their lifestyles, pretending like nothing's wrong. No, find a community of people that are true with themselves and know that mental health is a thing. You don't want to associate yourselves with somebody who doesn't believe that mental health is a problem, because that's not going to help you. So if you are struggling, find a community of people that you can relate to and also rely on, because they are going to be there for you, because they are going through the same things that you are going through.
To anyone that's watching, in the description of this video will be a link to the Suicide Crisis Text Line's website. So go and check that out if you're ever having thoughts of leaving this earth. Chaz, thank you so much for being here. And to anyone that's enjoyed Chaz's story, check out the description once again for all the links on how to connect with him. Let's keep getting better together, one day at a time.